So it's Tuesday, March 22nd, 2022. I'm here at the Epinal American Cemetery in Epinal, France. There's the visitor center. I thought I'd give you a quick walking tour. This is the main memorial building here. If you see these stones laid out in alternating sizes, it leaves those green patches of grass, and you can then see that through the opening of the memorial. They're doing a little work here today. The American Battle Monuments Commission keeps these cemeteries in just absolute pristine condition. Let me get a little bit closer here. So the memorial itself was designed by a guy named William Adams Delano. He was a New York architect, designed a lot of Beaux Arts and Art Deco buildings in the 1920s and 30s. If you've ever been to the Marine Air Terminal at LaGuardia Airport in New York, the shuttle used to fly out of there. That was designed by Delano. And so you can see elements of that kind of Art Deco design coupled with kind of very classical motifs. So as you get closer here, you'll see, might get a little loud, these what are called bas-relief sculptures in the side of the memorial. Those were designed by a woman sculptor, Malvina Hoffman. Let's see if we can zoom in there a little. And one on the left here is called Crusade, and the one on the right is called Sacrifice. And she actually served herself in the Red Cross in both World War I and World War II. She was a very interesting woman, friends with Gertrude Stein and a lot of the avant-garde artists and writers of the day. And she did these beautiful relief sculptures. So we're going to walk around. We're going to come around to that building a little bit later. So the grounds at all these cemeteries, certainly this one, are just amazing. So the landscape architect was a guy named Homer L. Fry, who is from Denton County, Texas, and went to Texas A&M as an undergrad, and then went to Cornell University, served in World War I, was a lieutenant colonel. And then after World War I, helped design some of the American World War I cemeteries as a landscape architect, and then was very involved in several World War II cemeteries as well. So these are the walls of the missing. So these list the names of deceased service members who were never found. Occasionally there is a rosette. You'll see next to some of these is a rosette, and that means that that service member has been found and discovered. So they continue to find remains, and using DNA and other techniques, they have found numerous unknown deceased from World War II and other wars. So now we're getting out into the main area here, which is really just spectacular. This sits, we'll walk in back there in a moment, but this sits above kind of the Moselle River and the Moselle Valley. So it really just has this incredible vista, but you start to get a sense of the scope. Let's see if we can get closer to that. That's a lawnmower, and it's really extraordinary the way it works, mowing the grass in between the burial markers. So we're going to visit a couple of the brothers' grave sites. So the cemeteries are organized by section. So every grave is identified by section, row, and grave number. So this is section A. This is a smaller cemetery, about 5,000 buried here. And so there's only two sections, A on the left side and B on the other side. It's really just an extraordinary setting. So we're going to go over here. We're looking for row 11. This is our first set of brothers. That is 14. This is 13. 11. So this is something I didn't really realize. I have not been to this cemetery before. I've been to most of the World War II cemeteries, but not all. And Epinal was one of the ones I had not been to. I did have a wonderful summer intern, Catherine Lynn, who took photographs of many of the cemeteries and some of those that I had not been able to make it to. And she took some great pictures of this cemetery. So we come across our first set of brothers here, which are the Lang brothers, Joseph Lang and William Lang, who were from Cleveland. The family name was originally Langa. They were Slovakian, and there were 4 boys, and at some point 3 of the boys had their names changed, kind of Americanized, to Lang. And it may have been when they joined the U.S. Army. But one thing I'll note here, and I didn't realize this until I came out and visited, so there's, the American World War II cemeteries are very, are not segregated by race, rank, or religion. And so everyone is buried among each other. And as far as I can tell, there's typically no pattern in terms of, different units buried together or people from the same state. But there is this pattern of brothers. And so we're going to see here, as we go along this row, that there are pairs of brothers buried side by side in a row, in a line of row here. And so we start here with the Lang brothers. I won't go into all these stories in detail because you know them from the book. And so if we just go one over here, these are the Steinbach brothers, who are not in my book, only because it just means we were not able to track down the family. So there's a number of brothers buried side by side in these cemeteries, and we just never could track down the family. But we continue the work to try to track them down. In fact, something very exciting is happening in genealogical circles, which is the 1950 U.S. Census is becoming public on April 1st, 2022, so in just a couple weeks. And that will help potentially track down some of these families. American census records are kept private for 65 years. So I did have use of the 1940 census, which was really helpful. But having the 1950 census could help track down some of these families. And then here, next row down, are the Duffy brothers from Chicago. John Duffy, the oldest, as you might remember, he was 33 years old and a pharmacist, married with 2 kids, and volunteered. His mother, Catherine Stuppi, was a German immigrant, and he felt that and she, by the way, had kind of raised the family by herself, and he felt that America had done such a great job of welcoming his immigrant mother that he wanted to pay his country back. And there's his younger brother, Eddie Duffy. He was not quite so excited to join, but he did. He was drafted, served in the 45th Infantry. And here they are, buried side by side. John's son, Jack Duffy, was old enough to remember his dad, which is not the case for most children of a lot of World War II veterans. I think there were 7 sons or daughters of deceased brothers that I interviewed, and most of them never knew their fathers, but Jack did. His father was older. He was 33 years old in the war, and he was old enough certainly to remember his father and remember him quite well. And so later we'll go in the local town here. There's a road named after the Duffy brothers called Rue des Frères Duffy, Duffy Brothers Road, and it's named in honor of the Duffy brothers, and also because of the many times that Jack has come to visit his father and uncle here at Epinal. So here's another set of brothers, the Kusser brothers from Pennsylvania. Not in my book, was not able to track them down. The Barnes brothers, who are in my book, from LaGrange, Illinois, the two youngest sons of a very well-regarded federal judge, John Barnes, in Chicago. Both great athletes. This is Bud. It's Paul H., but he went by Bud Barnes. And he wanted to join the Army so badly. He had to take the physical exam 3 times because of an old football injury. And Doug here actually turned down Harvard to volunteer for the war and served in an engineer combat battalion. These are the Temple brothers who, again, unfortunately, we were not able to track down. So I think that's it for this kind of grouping of brothers. But there is another one back here. Let's see if we can get a picture of this lawnmower, which I think is rather extraordinary. You know, the grounds are just really amazing. We're just kind of a little bit pre-spring here. So in a few weeks, this will really start to flower, but it's very green. So if you can see that lawnmower and the way it automatically goes around the gravestones like that. Isn't that amazing? So we're looking for, I think we're looking for row 36. There's 32. It's 34. And there's 36. So here are the Morabito brothers, Anthony and Frank from New York. Unfortunately not in my book. We're not able to track them down, unfortunately. So again, there's kind of a similar grouping of brothers here, not completely lined up in a row, but pretty close. So then we've got right here are the Vermillion brothers, Fred and William, who are from Olween, Iowa, kind of a railroad town. It was known as Hub City because it was served as a hub for all the railroads. And they both, William and Fred, were both so-called railroaders and worked for the railroad. And here they are buried side by side at Epinal. Fred, before he left, was married and had a daughter, Marcia Kay Vermillion. And after Fred died in the war, his mother remarried, as many did. And she didn't grow up hearing much about her father or the Vermillion family. But it was clear that she never forgot her dad. So here's another group, again, not totally in line here, but all close to each other. There's clearly some organization of these brothers. These are the DiPiero brothers from Ohio. Unfortunately, was not able to track down the families. And then right here, so it's just very interesting. If you look at the symmetry there, there's the Miller brothers, and there's the DiPiero brothers, and here's the Vermilion brothers, and here's the Morabito brothers, right? So even I didn't realize until, so it's not in a row, right? But it's exactly symmetrical. If we walk through here, there's the Vermilion brothers. There's the Piero brothers. And here are the Miller brothers, who are in the book. If you remember, they're from Cambridge, Massachusetts. They call themselves PKs, preacher's kids. Their father was pastor of the Cambridge Old Baptist Church. He was also dean of the Harvard Divinity School for some time. But as much as a religious man as their father was, he also left school, left college to volunteer for the U.S. Marines in World War I. And the sons all did the same. Samuel left Harvard to join the Army Air Forces. And Albert left Davidson. In fact, he was declared ineligible for F because he had severe asthma and allergies. But he still volunteered to be an ambulance driver. And Samuel H. Jr., who went by Howard, he too, before the war, he was married while he was training out in Mountain Home, Idaho. He met a local girl and was married and had a baby, Karen Miller. And in fact, he volunteered for a fairly risky mission, Operation Market Garden, because he wanted to finish his tour and get home to see his baby girl, and sadly was killed on that mission. And his younger brother, Al, who was an ambulance driver, volunteered, was killed in a car accident. A truck hit his ambulance in February 1945. And here they are now, buried side by side at Epinal. So let's walk toward the back here. And it's incredible, the scope whenever you go to these cemeteries. My 19-year-old son said something interesting when looking out at these crosses. He said, imagine if they were all just standing there. So rather than burial markers, you had human beings standing. It would give you a sense of the loss. It also gives you a sense of, the many stories. I just happened to choose this topic of brothers and was very fortunate to be able to track down some of these families and tell their stories. But, I was able to track down, 6 sets of brothers at this cemetery. So kind of 12 story, there's 5,000 stories here to track down and tell their stories. So you get a sense of how this sits above. That's the Moselle River Valley there. It's really quite striking. I mean, all the locations of these cemeteries are just kind of extraordinary. And you can just see they're at work on these cemeteries every day, just in perfect shape. So I think we have one more set of brothers we want to visit. They're over here, also in section A. There's just 2 sections here, A and B. But we're looking for row. So here's These stand out rather prominently. You'll see these on occasion. This is a Medal of Honor winner. You'll see that written in gold, John D. Kelly from Pennsylvania. So again, there's no one's separated by rank, although there's one exception to that, which we're going to see at Lorraine Cemetery, who of course is General George Patton. But he's the one exception, perhaps deservingly so. But otherwise, you know, regardless of medals or rank or race or religion, everyone is buried equally among everyone else. But for a Medal of Honor winner, you do get this this gold writing on it, which is really something to see. You don't see many of those. I think there's, of 5,000 burials here, I think there's only 4 or 5 Medal of Honor winners at Epinal. Yes, here are the Leland brothers, who are originally from Wilsaw, Montana. Eventually made their way to Seattle. So you have Theodore H. Leland, who went by Ted. He was the oldest. And you have Edwin N. Leland, the youngest. He went by Pete. Their mother, Alice Walker, grew up in the American West and dreamed of going to music school, but her family couldn't afford it. But her musical aspirations ultimately flowered in her own children. So Ted Leland had his own Western band, the Rhythm Aces, and they traveled all throughout Montana. We have a great poster of Ted Leland and his band. And of course, often accompanying him was his youngest brother, Pete, who played the guitar. And here they are, the 2 Leland brothers, now buried side by side, half a world away in Epinal. So I'm guessing these trees at some point flower in the springtime, which is probably just extraordinary. But it is a beautiful morning here. Clear skies, a little bit crisp. Just catch the dew on the grass there. You'd think these cemeteries were built, 5 years ago. They just are pristine, perfect condition. You can just appreciate this here. Look at the edging on the grass. There's like there's nothing. Perfect circles, it's almost like the dirt is raked. Really extraordinary. So it might be a little dusty and noisy, but we're going to see if we can get up into the memorial building. There are a couple other sets of brothers buried in section B, which is over there. Just 2 sets, I believe, not ones that are in my book, and both of them are not buried side by side. So most of the brothers who were buried in overseas cemeteries are side by side, about 90%, but there's about 1 of every 10 instances where, for whatever reason, they're not buried next to each other, and they might be in 2 different cemeteries, but in this case they're in the same cemetery. In fact, one set of brothers in the same row, but just not right next to each other. And there were various reasons for that. Sometimes they were found at very different times. Some of the brothers, especially if they were in the Army Air Forces, may have been found some years after the war and buried afterwards. So let's see if we can just get some shots here inside. Here's the back of the memorial. Written in English and French. Might not want me to take pictures in there. Let's see. This is really extraordinary.